So this is my introduction on common scabers. So this is my common scabers. They were originally wild caught. This is about 3rd or 4th gen. These are all about to be sold. There is 250 in here, so that probably adds up about to 300 by now. They all like to kind of hide in here. I like these because the care for them they're relatively easy, but they multiply so fast. I'm always consistently having to sell scabers. They adapt well to almost, I'd prefer to say 72 to about 80, low 80s in temp. They need not as much humidity as others. I prefer to feed them potatoes because the potatoes don't rot as much and they don't create that mold and invite mites. Also, the substrate I use in here is actually the Lugarti Isopod and millipede mix. I love the size of the good majority of them. I like how big they can get, and they're a great starter, especially if you catch them in your own yard. These ones are from Nevada though, so your species of isopods vary locally. Another reason that makes them a great starter is that they're just high ventilation. So these are actually screen door patches that had a sticky, but I taped over it just in case. And low humidity. So I use the Lugarti Isopod and millipede substrate, which does help keep moisture and a little bit of jungle flooring. This helps a lot, especially if you have hiding places like this and you mist once a day to once maybe every 3 days, depending on your location. For a while I did experiment with food for them, but over time I realized potatoes and carrots are actually the best. Look, there's actually a small little guy in there right now. He's hard to see though. But they prevent mold, and if you can fight mold, you are able to fight mites and little pests that will come. So you can actually see where they have dug little holes inside of it. When I tried fish flakes, apples, it just molded way too quickly. The potatoes are a good one, especially other gourds and sweet potatoes, yams, they love it. So even though they are common, cuttlebone in general is a great source of calcium for them. You should always put a chunk in there. What I do is I actually take the cuttlebone, I break a chunk of it, and I place it in there. And they'll pick at it. You'll actually see it wear down over time, especially if you have a bunch in here like I do. They're all burrowing right now, but there's about 250 in here. Habitat is actually one of the most important things to have, provide, and remember. I really learned from experience, this being my first habitat for them, and I was really just using a cling wrap, taping the sides, but this was something I had to spray about 3 times a day. So I'm using a smaller container. I'm going to put my juveniles in here. So what I have so far as the base is regular potting soil. I don't suggest it because regular potting soil, even if it's organic, tends to have perlite, and perlite can damage fresh isopods basically. It can injure them because it's crushed pieces of obsidian. So this is a temporary until I get more, but I only do this for my common armadilliums and my common scabers. The rest of my species always get the premium isopod and millipede mix. So once I get that soil down, I normally mix it with some spangium moss. I put a piece of bark in there, but first what I do before anything is I put calcium already into this soil. I just use regular reptile calcium with vitamin D, and I sprinkle a tad onto the soil. I always say a tad but mess up. Okay, I didn't mess up there, cool. This is when you'd also add leaf litter because they primarily eat that. These, if with my commons, unlike that one that has the actual substrate, I like to put a lot of leaf litter and potatoes in there so they actually have a food source. Another fun thing that people don't really know about isopods is they're not actually bugs, they're crustaceans. So these crustaceans actually have gills that they breathe through. Your isopods don't actually need a water dish, they'll drown if they have one. So here I'm just putting my juveniles in there. You can see how small he is. Okay, so the juveniles I moved in here are super tiny. So they're hard to see, but I got them all placed in there. So I got a little bit of moss. I'm buying more moss, so once I get some, I'm not too worried. It also helps hold humidity. And because they're so small, instead of using bark for juveniles, I always use little seashells because I just have so many and I find them resourceful, plus my little bits of cuddle bone. So this is what it all came from. Don't throw away your old substrate. What you can do is always spray it. Because this isn't the primary food source one, I'm going to put bits of potato in there, put ventilation, and close it. Because there still might be little roly-polies in here, little isopods we're going to have to see. What I also pulled them out of was mixed species. So I have a bunch of common armadillium that are going to go in with my other common armadilliums. I normally get the lid with one squirt. I just put ventilation holes on. And it's time for me to label it. I am going to check the original substrate in a little bit to see if any of the tiny babies surface, and then I'll move them back in here. But I'll still keep that for a couple of months. I'm about to put the label on this. So this one's a little more thriving and active to show you, but these are a bunch of my Scabers still. They're also a little different in color. They're doing extremely well. See that little one hiding in that potato? Humidity stays the same. They come in a lot of different colors. I absolutely adore them. Like, look at this guy. He's huge. And there's a bunch of small ones. These are mixed with vulgars though, but under the right conditions they really will thrive. This is about one of my favorite tanks of the peas, but I'm about to move a little bit of the baby juveniles into this one, the very small ones. But they seem to be happy, doing well. They have their calcium bone that they've actually really dug into. I'll have to replace it soon. So these are a great spot. They're a great starter morph. I love them. They're really easy, really cheap. It's very simple. I like that they can handle regular potting soil. This tank and both this tank are using the premium millipede and isopod substrate, and I really suggest it. It's about $20 a bag, but it's easier than trying to find topsoil and organic soils that don't have perlite and all the fertilizers and watering agents. It's super easy. But hey, I also suggest experimenting and making your own substrate if you have the resources. I just love looking at all these little guys. One common mistake I do see though in people keeping them is they give their isopods a water dish. This is not a water dish though. Because they are crustaceans, they actually thrive off of the humidity and the moisture they get from their food. They will drown if you give them a water dish. But that's all I can think of so far. This guy, though, he's just my absolute favorite. I adore him. He's so large, too. So really all I can say is learn from my mistakes. Like, from experience, I've learned that that blue container I had with the cerium wrap on the top was just far too much maintenance. It does not keep humidity. The important things to remember are proper humidity for your species of isopods, proper ventilation, proper food like potatoes that don't attract mites and mold as much, and calcium.